What had begun with a simple question, could ship design be different, had blossomed into a renaissance of innovation throughout the Empire. Humans, once seen as junior partners in the galactic community, now stood as equals, valued for their unique perspective and approach to problems. As Ju watched a small transport ship rise from the planet below, its hull flexing gracefully as it accelerated, she thought about those rainy days in the New Haven archives. The true discovery hadn't been the ship designs themselves, but the reminder that progress often comes from looking at old problems in new ways, from challenging fundamental assumptions rather than accepting them. The medallion at her neck hummed in harmony with her thoughts, as if acknowledging this deeper truth. The new era wasn't just about faster ships or stronger defenses. It was about an empire that had remembered how to learn to grow and to value the unexpected wisdom that could come from any of its countless worlds and species. And that, Ju realized, was a legacy far greater than she had ever imagined possible. Walking to the center of the platform, Ju felt strangely calm. She knelt as tradition required, looking up at the Emperor, who now held a medallion that glowed with an internal light. For extraordinary contributions to the Empire's technological advancement, for challenging established principles and opening new pathways of discovery, and for selflessly sharing knowledge that could have brought personal power, I present you with the Imperial Medal of Innovation, the first human to receive this honor in 3,000 years. As the Emperor placed the medallion around her neck, Ju felt its surprising warmth. She had been told it contained elements that resonated with the wearer's bioelectric field, creating a connection that would last her lifetime. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said, rising. "This honor belongs not just to me, but to all those who dared to imagine different possibilities." The Emperor nodded in acknowledgement, then raised his hands. At this signal, the massive engines of the Convergence ignited. Unlike traditional Imperial ships with their thunderous roar, the biomimetic engines produced a harmonic hum that seemed to resonate with the very structure of the ship. With fluid grace, the enormous vessel began to move, its hull subtly shifting like the skin of some great cosmic creature. Lights rippled along its surface in patterns that reminded Ju of ocean waves on Earth, a design element suggested by a young engineer who had never seen an ocean but had been fascinated by Earth's natural phenomena. As the Convergence accelerated away on its maiden voyage, the assembly erupted in applause and various species-specific expressions of approval. Later, at the reception, Ju found herself approached by countless officials and representatives. Many simply wanted to congratulate her, but others sought her opinion on new applications of biomimetic principles in their fields. In a quiet moment, she found herself standing with Minho and Yunha at a viewport, watching distant ships move through space with the new fluid grace that had become common throughout the Empire. "Did you ever imagine it would go this far?" Yunha asked, gesturing to the bustling reception, where humans mingled as equals with the founding species. Ju shook her head. "Never. I just wanted to build a better ship." "You did more than that," Minho said. "You reminded the Empire that progress comes from diversity of thought. That's a far more important discovery than any ship design." A familiar voice interrupted them. "Engineer Park." They turned to find Hyesu Kim, the senior engineer who had once tried to suppress their technology. 3 years had changed her as well. Her imperial uniform now incorporated elements of traditional Earth design, a small but significant shift. "Senior Engineer Kim," Ju greeted her with respect. "I owe you an apology," Hyesu said directly. "I was wrong to resist your discovery. I feared change would diminish what humans had achieved within the Imperial system. I didn't understand that it would instead elevate us all." "Change is always frightening," Ju acknowledged, "even for those of us who initiate it." Hyesu nodded. "The Shipwrights Guild has formally requested that I lead a delegation to Earth. We wish to search the ancient archives there for other forgotten innovations." After Hyesu departed, Juwoo's communication device chimed. It was a message from Chono, who was overseeing the new shipyard in a previously neglected sector. The first ships built there had just completed their trials, all exceeding performance expectations. As the celebration continued around them, Ju found a moment to slip away to a private viewport. Below her stretched the vast cityscape of transcendence, where buildings now incorporated biomimetic principles in their very structure, allowing them to adapt to weather conditions and population needs. In the distance, she could see the institute she had helped create, now grown to 5 times its original size. There, engineers from across the galaxy worked together, combining perspectives in ways that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. "That's the point," Jae-hyun said. "You showed us a new way of thinking. We're just taking it to its logical conclusion." Later that day, Ju received a personal message from the Emperor. It was brief but significant. "The Empire grows through adaptation. You have reminded us of this essential truth. The first Imperial biomimetic flagship will begin construction next month. I would be honored if you would attend the ceremony." As she looked out over the Institute that evening, watching ships with fluid organic lines rising into the darkening sky, Ju thought about how far they had come from that rainy day in the New Haven archives. What had begun as curiosity about forgotten designs had transformed into a revolution that was reshaping the Empire itself. And this was just the beginning. The paradigm shift was still accelerating, with new applications of biomimetic principles emerging daily. As humanity's status continued to rise throughout the galaxy, Ju wondered what other forgotten human knowledge might be waiting to be rediscovered, and what new chapters of galactic history they might write together. 3 years had passed since Ju Park discovered those forgotten files in the New Haven archives. Standing on the ceremonial platform orbiting Transcendence, she barely recognized the Empire she now lived in. Below them, the massive Imperial flagship Convergence gleamed in the starlight. Its hull shimmered with an almost living quality, a perfect blend of biomimetic principles and traditional Imperial engineering. At over 2 kilometers in length, it was the largest vessel ever built with the new technology, designed to showcase the Empire's renewed technological prowess. "Nervous?" asked Minho, adjusting his formal Imperial attire. "A little," Ju admitted. "I never thought I'd be standing here." Nearby, Yoon Ha-kwon, who had joined their team during the Institute's early days and quickly become one of its most brilliant researchers, was deep in conversation with a foreign scientist. 3 years ago, such a casual exchange between a human and a member of the founding species would have been unthinkable. The platform held representatives from hundreds of worlds. Imperial officials in elaborate ceremonial dress stood alongside colonial governors, guild masters, and military commanders, all gathered to witness the launch of a ship that symbolized the Empire's new direction. Admiral Taehyun Kang approached, his formal military uniform adorned with symbols of his rank and achievements. "Director Park, the Emperor will arrive shortly. Are you prepared for the ceremony?" "As prepared as I can be," Ju replied. Kang made a gesture of approval. "You've earned this moment. Not many can say they changed the course of an entire empire. I just found some old files. What happened after was the work of thousands." "Humility," Kang said, his translator giving the word a tone of amusement. "Perhaps that's another human trait we could learn from." A sudden hush fell over the crowd as Imperial guards took positions around the platform. The Emperor's shuttle approached, its design combining the majesty of traditional Imperial craft with the fluid grace of biomimetic technology. As the Emperor emerged, everyone bowed deeply. He moved to the center of the platform where a communication array would broadcast his words throughout the Empire. "Today," the Emperor began, "we celebrate not just the launch of a new flagship, but the dawn of a new era for our Empire." He spoke of the Empire's long history, its periods of growth and times of stagnation. Without directly criticizing the past, he acknowledged that the Empire had perhaps become too comfortable in its established ways. 3 years ago," he continued, "a human engineer from a small colony world reminded us of an essential truth, that wisdom can come from unexpected sources, and innovation often requires us to question our most fundamental assumptions." Ju felt hundreds of eyes turn toward her. The changes we have witnessed since then extend far beyond ship design. Trade between previously isolated worlds has increased by 64%. Piracy in the Outer Rim has decreased by 73%. Scientific cooperation between species has reached unprecedented levels. The Emperor gestured toward the gleaming ship below. The convergence represents what we can achieve when we bring different perspectives together. Its design team included members of 27 species, led by human, Varn, and Pelfoxy engineers working as equals. After describing the ship's capabilities, which included the ability to cross the entire empire in less than a month, a journey that once took nearly a year, the Emperor moved to the ceremonial portion of the event. It is now my honor to present the Imperial Medal of Innovation. He turned directly to Juwu. Engineer Juwu Park, please step forward. The meeting concluded with signed agreements and polite farewells. As the delegation departed, Hana Yu entered, carrying data tablets. The first commercial transport completed its maiden voyage today, she announced, her face bright with excitement. Juwu, it made the Centauri Proxima run in 11 days. The previous record was 42 days. Juwu took the tablet, studying the performance metrics. Any issues? None. The biomimetic hull adapted perfectly to the radiation bursts in the Proxima sector. The captain says it's like flying a living creature rather than a machine. Later that day, Juwu received an unexpected visitor. Admiral Tatian Kang arrived without announcement, his tall Varn frame seeming somehow less imposing than when they had first met on New Haven. Engineer Park, he greeted her. Or should I say, Director Park now. Admiral Kang. This is a surprise. The Varn made a gesture that Juwu had learned indicated respect. I've come to witness the changes you've set in motion, and to offer my personal congratulations. He joined her for a tour of the Institute. As they walked through the various research departments, Kang observed the mixed species teams with interest. You've created something remarkable here, he said. Not just the technology, but this collaboration. In my 300 years of service to the Guild, I've never seen species working together quite like this. Juwu watched as a young human engineer explained a concept to a Meridian colleague, their hands moving in shared excitement over a holographic display. Different perspectives lead to better solutions, she said. We're finding that combining biomimetic principles with traditional imperial technology creates possibilities neither approach could achieve alone. Kang made a clicking sound that Juwu now recognized as thoughtful agreement. The old guard at the Guild is still resistant. Haisu Kim continues to file official protests. I'm not surprised. Change is difficult, especially for those who excelled under the old system. Indeed. Yet the results speak for themselves. He gestured toward a large display showing a map of the Empire with new shipping routes highlighted in blue. The network was visibly denser than it had been 6 months ago, with connections reaching previously isolated regions. Worlds that once received supply shipments quarterly now receive them monthly, Kang noted. The economic impact alone has been substantial. Later that afternoon, Juwu received another report that made her pause. A small colony in the Outer Rim, previously considered too remote for effective defense, had successfully repelled a pirate attack using a patrol vessel equipped with biomimetic technology. The ship's superior maneuverability had allowed it to defend the colony despite being outnumbered. That evening, Juwu met with her original team for dinner in her quarters. Despite their new responsibilities, they maintained this weekly tradition. To the remembrance, Minho said, raising his glass in toast. Their prototype ship now sat in the Imperial Museum, visited by thousands each day. And to what comes next, added Hana. I heard something interesting today, Junho said after they had eaten. The Varn Academy of Sciences is considering revising some of their fundamental engineering principles that haven't changed in thousands of years. Juwu looked up in surprise. The Varn were the most conservative of the founding species, resistant to change in all forms. It's true, Minho confirmed. My Varn colleagues mentioned it. They're calling it adaptive engineering integration. Basically, they're admitting that their approach wasn't the only valid one. And it's not just engineering, Hannah added. There's talk of reviewing other fields where human approaches might offer alternatives. Medicine, agriculture, even architecture. Jiwoo felt a strange mix of pride and humility. We never set out to change the empire this way. But maybe it needed changing, Junho said quietly. 3,000 years of following rather than leading. Perhaps this was always waiting to happen. The next morning, Jiwoo was summoned to an emergency meeting. A massive holographic display showed a ship unlike anything she had seen before, a perfect fusion of biomimetic principles and imperial technology, but on a scale that seemed impossible. What am I looking at? She asked the project engineer, a brilliant Meridian named Jaehyun. The future, he replied. We've been applying your principles to imperial flagship design. This vessel could cross the entire empire in weeks rather than months, with defensive capabilities that make it virtually impregnable. Jiwoo studied the designs with growing amazement. This is beyond anything we imagined. A Pelfoxy Guild representative stepped forward without permission. Your Majesty, such unregulated distribution of advanced technology would destabilize established industrial systems. The Guild cannot allow. The Guild, the Emperor interrupted softly, does not make such decisions. I do. He turned back to Jiwoo. You would freely share your discovery with all my subjects, even those who might use it against your own interests. Knowledge grows when shared, Jiwoo said. If the entire empire has access to these principles, imagine how they might be improved upon by engineers from hundreds of different species, each bringing their own perspective. The Emperor made a sound that Jiwoo's translator couldn't quite interpret, something between a laugh and a sigh. 3,000 years, he said. 3,000 years since humanity joined us, and you still surprise me. He turned to the assembled officials. I have made my decision. The biomimetic ship design principles discovered by Engineer Park and her team will be made available to all Imperial citizens and institutions. The Shipwrights Guild will establish a new research division, with Engineer Park as its director, to explore these principles further. Hyesu Kim, who Jiwoo hadn't noticed among the officials, stepped forward. Your Majesty, I must protest. These designs have not been properly tested for. Your protest is noted, Senior Engineer Kim, the Emperor said. But my decision stands. Change comes to the Empire whether we wish it or not. Better to embrace it than resist it. As they left the Imperial Palace hours later, Minho turned to Jiwoo. I can't believe you just told the Emperor of the Galactic Empire that our technology belongs to everyone. Jiwoo looked up at the endless streams of ships moving through Transcendence's skies. It was the right thing to do. And besides, she smiled, now we get to see what happens when the entire galaxy starts thinking differently about ship design. What she didn't yet realize was how profoundly that different thinking would transform the Empire in the years to come. The imperial decree spread across the galaxy within days. From the central worlds to the furthest colonies, the announcement was the same. The revolutionary human ship designs would be shared freely throughout the Empire. Alongside this news came the Emperor's order to establish the Biomimetic Engineering Institute on Transcendence, with Jiwoo Park appointed as its director. 6 months after the Emperor's decision, Jiwoo stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed institute. Below her stretched vast manufacturing facilities, where the first wave of new ships was taking shape. Engineers from dozens of species worked side by side, combining the rediscovered human principles with their own unique perspectives. Director Park. A voice called from behind her. The delegation from Terran Prime has arrived. Jiwoo turned to see her assistant, a young Pelfoxy named Suman. In the months since the Institute's founding, Jiwoo had been surprised by how many non-humans had chosen names from Earth languages, a small but meaningful sign of humanity's rising influence. Thank you, Suman. Please show them to the main conference room. The Terran Prime delegation represented Earth's oldest and most prestigious engineering academy. Once, they had barely acknowledged Juwoo's existence. Now they had traveled across half the galaxy to offer partnerships. As she made her way to the meeting, Juwoo passed the quantum propulsion lab where Minho Lee now led a team of 30 researchers from 15 different species. He waved through the glass wall, too busy to step away from the complex calculations displayed around him. The conference room was already full when Juwoo arrived. Among the Terran delegates, she recognized several famous engineers who had previously shown little interest in colonial innovators like herself. "Director Park," said the lead delegate, bowing deeply, "Terran Prime Engineering Academy is honored to propose a formal alliance with your institute." Juwoo maintained her composure, though inside she felt a mix of vindication and amusement. "I'm pleased to hear it. Please, let's discuss the details." As the meeting progressed, Juwoo found her mind wandering to the other changes taking place throughout the Empire. Reports arrived daily of human engineers being recruited for leadership positions that would never have been considered for before. Junho Kim, who had once provided his family's small shipyard for their secret project, now oversaw production at the Imperial Central Shipyards. The first human ever appointed to such a position, Do-hyun Yoon, a brilliant young engineer Juwoo had recruited from New Haven, had been named head of the new Frontier Defense Initiative, tasked with designing protective systems for vulnerable outer colonies. "That was brave," the Varn said, his translator giving his words an amused tone. "Hae-soo Kim has been trying to ban your technology since my initial report." "Why?" Juwoo asked. "Why fight so hard against something that could help the Empire?" "Status," Kang replied simply. "Humans who rise in the guild, like Kim, do so by perfectly adopting Imperial methods. Your innovation suggests their approach was wrong all along." Before they could continue, Juwoo's communication device chimed with an urgent message. Back at their workshop, her team was facing trouble. When Juwoo arrived at the workshop, she found Imperial guards sealing the entrance. Minho and the others stood outside, looking furious. "They're confiscating everything," Minho told her, claiming it's for safety evaluation. One of the guards approached. "By order of Senior Engineer Hae-soo Kim, all materials related to the unregistered vessel design are to be secured pending safety review." Juwoo started to protest, but her communication device chimed again. The message made her freeze. "Imperial Pale AC request as your presence. Transport arriving within 1 hour." The Imperial shuttle that arrived was unlike any ship Juwoo had seen before, elegant and clearly designed for important officials. The pilot, a calm Pelfoxy, simply said, "Engineer Park, you and your team are requested at the capital. Please board immediately." Transcendence, the capital world of the Galactic Empire, was overwhelming. Massive structures of impossible architecture rose into the clouds. Ships of all sizes filled the sky lanes. Species from across the galaxy moved through the streets in a dizzying display of diversity. The shuttle docked at the Imperial Palace, a structure so vast it seemed more like a small city than a building. Inside, they were led through endless corridors by silent guides. Finally, they reached a waiting area where Admiral Kang stood with several high-ranking officials. "Engineer Park," Kang said, "the Emperor has taken personal interest in your discovery. This is unprecedented for a technological matter." Juwoo felt her heart pounding. Why would the Emperor care about a ship design? A tall, elegant Meridian stepped forward. "Because, Engineer Park, your discovery has created a political crisis. I am High Counselor Minju Choi. The Shipwrights Guild is demanding your technology be classified as a security risk and suppressed. The Frontier Worlds Alliance is threatening trade sanctions if they are denied access to it. 3 major houses have offered you protection and resources in exchange for exclusive rights." "We never wanted to cause trouble," Juwoo said. "We just thought we could contribute something useful." "Innovation often causes disruption," Minju replied with a slight smile. "The question now is, What do you want to do with your discovery? Before Ju could answer, large doors at the end of the hall swung open. A voice called out, "The Emperor will see Engineer Park now." To her surprise, Ju was told her team could accompany her. They entered a vast circular chamber with a vaulted ceiling, showing a real-time view of space above Transcendence. At the center was not a throne, as Ju had expected, but a simple raised platform where a figure stood looking out at the stars. The Emperor of the Galactic Empire was a Varn, taller than Admiral Kang, and with skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. When he turned to face them, his forearms moved in a graceful pattern that Ju recognized as a formal Varn greeting. "Engineer Ju Park," the Emperor said, his voice translated into perfect human standard. "Your discovery has created quite a stir in my empire." Ju bowed deeply, as did her team. "Your Imperial Majesty, we meant no disruption." "Of course you didn't," the Emperor said, with what seemed like genuine amusement. "Yet disruption finds us all the same." He gestured for them to rise. "Tell me, what do you hope to achieve with this technology?" Ju looked at her friends, then back at the Emperor. This was the moment that would define everything. She chose honesty. "Your Majesty, for 3,000 years, humans have been followers in the Empire, adopting imperial technology and methods. But before we joined the Empire, we had our own approaches to engineering problems. This ship design comes from those forgotten approaches. We hope to show that humanity can contribute something valuable to the Empire, a different way of thinking." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. "And who should control this technology?" "The Guild wishes to regulate it. Several houses wish to own it exclusively. What do you want?" Ju took a deep breath and made her choice. "This technology belongs to all of humanity, Your Majesty, and by extension, to all species of the galaxy. It shouldn't be controlled by any single group." Gasps echoed from the officials gathered around the edges of the room. Even Admiral Kang looked surprised. "We will conduct a simple race," the Admiral announced, "from New Haven orbit to the third moon and back. My vessel's top speed is well documented." What followed wasn't really a race at all. The Remembrance reached the third moon before the Guild vessel had covered a quarter of the distance. But Ju didn't stop there. She demonstrated the ship's maneuverability with a series of tight turns and instantaneous stops that should have been physically impossible. When they returned to the shipyard, the Admiral was unusually quiet. His four hands kept making small, agitated movements, a sign of deep thought in Varn body language. "Engineer Park," he finally said, "what you have created here is not merely a new ship design. It is a fundamental challenge to established imperial science. The Guild will need to reconsider many things." "Admiral," Ju said, "we didn't create this to challenge the Empire. We want to contribute to it. These designs can improve transportation throughout imperial space, make dangerous regions safer to navigate, and open up new possibilities for exploration." The Admiral's translator couldn't quite capture the complex tone of his response. "Indeed, and that is precisely what concerns me. Change of this magnitude rarely comes without disruption." As the Admiral and his entourage prepared to leave, he turned back to Ju. "The Guild Council will want a full report. I suggest you prepare for considerable attention in the coming days. Not all of it will be positive." After they left, Hannah looked worried. "What does that mean for us?" Ju watched the Admiral's ship rise into the evening sky. "It means we've gotten the Empire's attention. Now we need to be ready for what comes next." She didn't yet realize just how massive the political storm they had created would be, or that their discovery would soon reach the Emperor himself. The news of Ju's revolutionary ship design spread through the Galactic Empire faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, the communication system at their small workshop couldn't handle the incoming messages. Government officials, private corporations, and curious engineers from dozens of species all wanted details about the human miracle ship. Minho slumped in his chair after another long day of explaining their work. "I never thought we'd become this famous." "Famous or infamous, Hannah said, looking at her tablet. The Shipwrights Guild just released an official statement claiming our design violates 16 different Imperial safety protocols. Jiwoo wasn't surprised. Admiral Kang had warned her about the Guild's reaction before he left New Haven. "They're afraid," she said simply. "We've challenged something they've believed in for thousands of years." A sharp knock interrupted them. Chunho opened the door to find two Imperial guards standing outside. "Engineer Jiwoo Park," one asked. "You have been summoned to appear before the Regional Guild Council tomorrow morning to answer questions about your unregistered vessel." The Regional Guild Council chamber was imposing, a vast room with high ceilings and rows of seats arranged in rising tiers. Jiwoo stood alone on the speaker's platform, facing 15 guild officials from various species. At the center sat a stern-faced human woman. "This hearing will now begin," announced the council secretary. Presiding is Senior Engineer Hyesu Kim of the Shipwrights Guild. Hyesu Kim studied Jiwoo with cold eyes. Though both were human, they couldn't have been more different. Hyesu had spent decades rising through guild ranks, adopting Imperial methods and mindsets along the way. "Engineer Park," Hyesu began, "your ship design bypasses essential safety systems required by Imperial Code 5892. How do you explain this blatant disregard for established safety protocols?" Jiwoo had prepared for this. The safety issues addressed by Code 5892 apply specifically to standard Imperial propulsion systems. Our biomimetic design eliminates those concerns entirely. The ship cannot suffer the kind of catastrophic failures the code was designed to prevent. For 2 hours, Hyesu and the other council members bombarded Jiwoo with technical questions. Some seemed genuinely curious, but Hyesu's questions grew increasingly hostile. "What you fail to understand," Hyesu finally said, "is that these protocols exist for a reason. The Guild has spent thousands of years perfecting ship design. Your reckless experimentation puts lives at risk." Jiwoo took a deep breath. "With respect, Senior Engineer, innovation always involves some risk. But the greater risk is stagnation. The Empire hasn't significantly improved basic ship design in over 2,000 years. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Criticizing Imperial technology so directly was almost unheard of. Hyesu's face hardened. "The council will now deliberate. You are dismissed." Outside the chamber, Jiwoo found Admiral Kang waiting. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting another vessel approaching from New Haven surface. I don't know what it is. The configuration doesn't match any known ship type." Donghyun looked at his own screen and frowned. The unknown vessel was moving at incredible speed, faster than any ship of its size should be able to move. His communication officer spoke up. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the unknown vessel." "Put it through," Donghyun ordered. Jiwoo's voice filled the Imperial ship's bridge. "Imperial Customs Vessel, this is Engineer Jiwoo Park from New Haven Colony. We can assist in the capture of the smuggler. Please continue your pursuit." Before Donghyun could respond, the strange ship accelerated yet again, overtaking his vessels as if they were standing still. His entire bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the unknown ship rapidly closed in on the smuggler. Inside the Remembrance, Jiwoo felt the ship responding to her smallest inputs. "They're going to try to dive into the atmosphere to lose us," she told Minho. "Get ready." As predicted, the smuggler ship suddenly banked hard and plunged toward New Haven's thick atmosphere, a maneuver that would force the bulkier Imperial ships to slow down or risk breaking apart. But the Remembrance was different. Jiwoo followed, the biomimetic hull flexing and adapting to the increasing pressure. The smuggler, seeing this strange ship still on his tail, tried a series of violent maneuvers, sharp turns, sudden stops, and spinning dives. Jiwoo matched every move. The Remembrance's quantum drive allowed it to change direction almost instantly, without the momentum issues that plagued conventional ships. In less than 5 minutes, she had positioned their ship directly in the smuggler's path. When the smuggler tried to swerve away, Ju activated the Remembrance's tractor beam, another modified design from the ancient archives. The smuggler's ship suddenly froze in place, caught. As the Imperial customs ships finally caught up, their communications officer couldn't keep the awe from his voice. Unknown vessel. That was incredible. Please identify yourself fully. Ju smiled. I already did. I'm Engineer Ju Park from New Haven Colony. And this is humanity's contribution to the Empire. 2 days later, the news had spread throughout the sector. Ju and her team were summoned to the Colonial Administrator's office, where they found not only the administrator but also several Imperial officials. Most imposing among them was a Varn, tall, four-armed, with iridescent scaled skin and eyes that seemed to analyze everything they saw. Engineer Park, the Colonial Administrator said nervously, "This is Admiral Tahyun Kang of the Imperial Shipwrights Guild. He has questions about your ship." Admiral Kang studied Ju with his large compound eyes. "Engineer Park," he said, his translator converting his clicking speech into human language, "your vessel has created quite a stir. You claim it is based on old human designs." "Yes, Admiral," Ju replied steadily. "Designs that were abandoned when humanity joined the Empire." "Impossible," the Admiral stated flatly. "The performance described by the customs vessels cannot be achieved with any known physical principles. Your vessel would have torn itself apart during those maneuvers. With Imperial design principles, yes," Ju agreed. "But our biomimetic approach allows the ship to flex and adapt like a living organism. Would you like to see it for yourself?" The Admiral's head tilted slightly, a Varn expression of skepticism. "I would indeed." At the shipyard, the Admiral walked slowly around the Remembrance, occasionally touching its strange hull with his upper right hand. His entourage of guild engineers scanned the vessel, muttering to each other in confused tones. "The principles at work here," the Admiral finally said, "do not align with 15,000 years of established Imperial engineering doctrine." "That's correct." Minho stepped forward. Human engineers before the Imperial contact were exploring different approaches to space travel, approaches based on Earth's unique life forms and physical understanding. Admiral Kang's compound eyes narrowed. "You are suggesting that the Empire's approach to engineering is incomplete." Ju chose her words carefully. "I'm suggesting that different species might find different solutions to the same problems. The Empire's technology is impressive, but perhaps there's room for other perspectives." "A demonstration," the Admiral said suddenly. "I wish to witness this vessel's capabilities myself." An hour later, they were in space. The Admiral had brought his own guild vessel, a sleek, typical Imperial design considered one of the fastest in the fleet. Ju piloted the Remembrance while the Admiral observed from his ship. Ju nodded. "And the biomimetic hull structure allows it to flex during high-speed maneuvers without breaking apart." Their progress was slow. Imperial technology was different enough from the old Earth systems that they had to adapt constantly. But after 3 months of secret work, they had a vessel roughly the size of a standard shuttle. "It looks strange," Hannah said as they stood back to examine their creation. She was right. Unlike the blocky, geometric Imperial ships, their vessel had a smooth, curved hull that seemed to flow from front to back. Its surface contained microscopic scales that could adjust to external pressures, similar to how fish scales worked in water. "The question is, will it fly?" Chuno asked. They chose a test date when the orbital traffic around New Haven would be lightest. The small vessel, which they had named Remembrance, sat ready in Chunho's shipyard. "If this works," Ju said, looking at her 3 colleagues, "everything changes." "And if it doesn't?" Hannah asked. "Then we're just some silly humans who wasted time on a failed project." Minho replied with a shrug. "Not the first time the older species have seen that." Ju took the pilot's seat. The controls were unlike Imperial ships, more intuitive, designed for human reflexes and thinking patterns. She started the power-up sequence. The ship hummed to life around her. On the monitors behind her, Minho, Hannah, and Junho watched anxiously. "Power level stable," Minho reported. "Quantum entanglement field forming correctly." Juwoo took a deep breath and engaged the drive. There was no roar of engines, no violent thrust pushing her back in her seat as she'd expected from Imperial ships. Instead, there was a gentle pull forward, as if the space in front of the ship was drawing it onward. The shipyard doors opened to the night sky. Juwoo guided the vessel upward, feeling the controls respond to her lightest touch. "It's working," she whispered. Then louder, "It's working." The ship climbed rapidly through New Haven's atmosphere, moving with a grace no Imperial vessel could match. Juwoo put it through a series of turns and dives, testing its limits. The biomimetic hull flexed and adapted, absorbing forces that would have torn a standard ship apart. When she landed an hour later, her friends were waiting with wide smiles and disbelieving eyes. That was, Junho struggled to find words. "Revolutionary," Minho finished for him. Juwoo stepped out of the ship, her legs shaky but her heart full of excitement. "This is just the beginning," she said. "These archives must contain hundreds of designs and concepts that were abandoned. We've been following the Empire's lead for 3,000 years, but maybe humanity has something to teach them too." As they stood there in the dim light of the shipyard, looking at their strange, beautiful creation, none of them realized they had just changed the course of galactic history. In the days to come, their discovery would send shockwaves through the Galactic Empire and forever alter humanity's place within it. The morning sky over New Haven Colony turned from black to purple as the sun began to rise. But today was no ordinary dawn. 6 small ships raced across the upper atmosphere. 5 Imperial customs vessels in pursuit of a known smuggler ship that had brazenly violated New Haven's border controls. Juwoo Park stood with her team on the observation deck of Junho's private shipyard, watching the chase on their tracking screens. "They'll never catch him," Minho Lee said, shaking his head. "That smuggler is flying a modified Pel Foxy skimmer. Those customs ships are too bulky." Juwoo watched the dots move across the screen, calculating distances and speeds in her head. Then she turned to look at their creation, the Remembrance, gleaming under the workshop lights. "This is our chance," she said quietly. Hanayu looked at her sharply. "You want to intervene? Are you crazy? We'll expose everything." "We'll be exposing it soon anyway," Juwoo replied. "But this way, we show what our ship can do, rather than just telling people about it." After a brief argument, they agreed. Minutes later, Juwoo sat in the pilot's seat, with Minho beside her as navigator. "Launching now," she said into her communicator. "Wish us luck." The Remembrance rose silently from the shipyard, its strange, fluid shape cutting through the air with almost no resistance. Juwoo pushed the quantum entanglement drive to half power, and the ship responded instantly, pulling itself toward the distant chase. In the control room of the lead Imperial customs vessel, Captain Dongyun Shin was growing frustrated. His ships had been chasing the smuggler for nearly an hour, and they were no closer to capturing it. The cold rain fell steadily on the metal rooftops of New Haven Colony. Engineer Juwoo Park pulled her coat tighter as she hurried through the crowded streets toward the old archive building. Most people avoided the archives. They were dusty reminders of a past that seemed increasingly irrelevant as humans adapted to life within the Galactic Empire. Juwoo was different. At 32, she had already earned a reputation as someone who questioned established practices, which made her both respected and somewhat isolated at the Colonial Engineering Authority where she worked. "You're late again," said the archive attendant, barely looking up from his screen. "Sorry, Deo. The transport tubes were slow today." Juwoo swiped her access card and headed to the basement level where the oldest records were stored. For 3 months, she had been spending her free time searching through these forgotten files. Her search began after a routine maintenance job on an Imperial transport ship. The Varn technicians, with their 4 arms and superior strength, had laughed at her suggestions for improving the engine cooling system. Human, These designs have been perfected over 15 millennia. The lead technician had told her, "Your species has only been part of the Empire for 3,000 years. Trust the process." But Ju couldn't stop thinking about it. The Empire's ships were impressive, yes, but they also seemed stuck. The same basic designs had been used for thousands of years with only minor improvements. In the dim light of the archive basement, Ju accessed her usual terminal. She had been methodically going through Earth's pre-Empire engineering archives, looking for something, anything, that might have been overlooked during humanity's rapid integration into Imperial technology. 6 hours later, her eyes were burning from staring at the screen. She was about to leave when a file caught her attention. Project Leviathan. Biomimetic Propulsion Systems, 2089. Ju opened it. The file contained detailed schematics for ship designs unlike anything she had ever seen in the Empire. These weren't the rigid, symmetrical vessels favored by the Varn and Pelfoxy. These ships were fluid, almost organic in their structure. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself. According to the efficiency calculations in the file, these designs should be capable of maneuvers that would tear apart any Imperial vessel. The propulsion system borrowed principles from Earth's sea creatures, particularly the way octopi moved through water by jet propulsion. Ju downloaded the files to her personal device, technically against archive rules, but she couldn't risk losing this discovery. On her way out, she almost bumped into Minho Lee, a fellow engineer who specialized in quantum systems. "Working late again?" Minho asked with a friendly smile. Ju hesitated. She needed help to understand some of the quantum aspects of the designs, but could she trust him? Minho had always been kind, and he had his own frustrations with Imperial technology limitations. "Actually, I found something you might want to see," she said, "but not here." 2 days later, Ju and Minho sat in her small apartment, surrounded by displays showing the ancient designs. "This is impossible," Minho said, running his hand through his hair. "These designs are using quantum entanglement principles that the Empire says are unstable." "But they're not unstable," Ju pointed out. "Look at these test results. Earth was on the verge of perfecting this technology when the Empire arrived. So why did we abandon it?" "Integration," Ju said. "The records show that humanity was so eager to join the galactic community that we adopted Imperial technology wholesale. We wanted to fit in, to be accepted." Minho nodded slowly. 3,000 years is a long time to be followers instead of leaders. "What if we actually built one of these?" Ju asked quietly. Minho looked at her with wide eyes. "You're not serious. The Guild would never approve experimental ship designs from humans." "Then we don't ask for approval. Not yet." The next month was a blur of secret meetings and careful planning. Ju brought in 2 more people, Hana Yu, a materials specialist, and Junho Kim, who had access to a small private shipyard his family had owned for generations. They worked at night, using scrapped parts and materials that wouldn't be missed. The design they chose was the simplest in the archives, a small scout vessel designed for speed and maneuverability rather than cargo or weapons. "The quantum entanglement drive is the tricky part," Minho explained one night as they worked in Junho's cold shipyard. "According to these old Earth designs, it allows the ship to essentially pull itself through space rather than push, like the difference between reaching for something versus throwing yourself at it.